Birds, people, and the dogs that bring them together. This is episode number 28. My name is Bill, and you're tied to the Woe Post. And before we go any farther, I'm just going to let you know I have two 3-month-old puppies here, and I've tried to record this intro, I think 3 times, and I've been unsuccessful. So if you hear them in here, I'm just going to roll with it. It is what it is. They're just puppies, and y'all have been around them before. I'll also say I don't know what I was thinking. I thought that, having one puppy is, it's a lot of work, of course. Everybody knows that. And I figured, well, I'll just take on another one and, he's just here for a short period of time. He's getting trained up. He'll be started. He'll run on some wild birds at end of September, early October, and then we'll find him a home, and he's going to go off as a started dog to somebody who's looking for one. Holy cow. Two puppies, two 3-month-old puppies at the same time. That's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. And that's why I'm recording this intro like 5 or 6 hours before it's going to publish. Not really what I had in mind when I planned on doing this, but it's still fun and they're still puppies, and it's twice the fun and twice the work. It is what it is. If you want to see updates on the puppies, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. I've been pretty active on there the last few weeks. There's a lot of puppy stuff on there. If you have questions about the puppies, you can contact me there on Facebook or Instagram, or you can email me at bill@thewopost.com. And then lastly, I'd like to thank our newest Patreon patron, Ellie Overham. Thanks for signing up. And like I said, we're going to get you some exclusive content here pretty soon. Probably a lot about puppies who are over here playing with their food bowls and their crates. But let's get on with their Wirehairs. Known for their distinctive beard and rough coat, German wire-haired pointers originated in Germany in the 19th century. Built to be an all-terrain, all-weather hunter of fur and feathers, Wirehairs are equally proficient in tall grass, deep woods, or water. Their sporty, weatherproof coat protects them from the elements as well as thorns and briars, and their shaggy beard and heavy eyebrows protect their face. They're a versatile, sturdy dog that stands as high as 26 inches at the shoulder, generally taller and heavier than their short-hair cousins. They're balanced, well-muscled, and agile, but like many versatile dogs, they require daily exercise as well as mental stimulation. Today we're talking German Wirehair Pointers with Liz Dixon, president of the German Wirehaired Pointer Club of America and co-owner of Backwoods Bird Dogs. Hey Liz, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, no problem, Bill.
So you've been into dogs for a long time, and Wirehairs almost that whole time, I guess?
That's correct.
Yeah, can you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and kind of tell us where you started out?
We were, a big family in Minnesota from an avid family of hunters, and we always had springers growing up. And I always went hunting with my dad because I took care of the dog, and I just wanted to be with my dad. And, they deer hunted too, but I had no interest in deer hunting because they didn't have a dog. So the Springer was a great dog, but when I started working at a vet clinic just out of high school, I want to say that I saw my first wire hair on the cover of Gun Dog. That I think and I've never been able to confirm it, that the first issue of Gun Dog had Walker's Blue Movie on it, but I'm pretty sure that that's what it was. And I just thought that was the coolest dog that I'd ever seen. And then a couple of months after that, a wirehair puppy came into our vet clinic that they must have had a dog door, and probably like 2 of them tried to smash out at the same time, and he hurt his back and he was paralyzed. And the vet couldn't really guarantee that he'd ever be a hunting dog. And so they decided to put him down. And I was just mortified. I said, "Oh, you can't do that. I want him." And because by that time, with medication, he was walking around and he seemed fine. Well, all of the techs that worked at the clinic at that time were doing obedience with their dogs. So I started doing obedience with, his name was Mikey. And we started, they were showing, and they were all going to shows and trying to get their CDs. And so the people that bred the dog gave me his paper. So I was able to get we actually got an American and a Canadian CD on him. And it was at a dog show for obedience. And I went to the breed ring and saw the Wirehairs, watched the Wirehairs at that show. And I was just like, oh my God, those dogs are unbelievable. And the lady that was there and ended up, that I got a puppy from her bitch was in heat at the time and they were breeding her. And I ended up getting a puppy from that litter. And that was really the real beginning, because then she encouraged me to show. At that time, I joined the National Breed Club, the GWPCA, and that was 1984, and have never looked back, and have always been a member of that club, and finished her show championship, got a senior hunter title on her, and then it just snowballed from there. That we were at a club meeting, and they were talking about their spring field trial. I said, well, what's a field trial? I was very new. And they told me what it was, and they found out that I had a horse and a trailer, and I could get there by myself. And they lined me right up, and I could not believe that they actually hunted their dogs on horseback. And that was the end. I was so hooked. And I think within a year I had a walking horse, because at the time she was a half draft horse that she pulled a carriage, and I belonged to the local fox hunting group, and I dabbled in a lot of things. But when I went to that field trial, and of course they were all, I had an English saddle, and I'm posting along, and everybody else is gliding along on their walkers, and I just looked at it and go, what kind of horse is that? Never even heard of that. And one of the short hair guys, in fact, it was a vet, Dr. John Bailey. He was just that kind of a guy, and he was giving kids rides on his walking horse. And this is so scary because I can still remember her name was Mariah. And I go, can I ride her? And I remember that glide. And I said, why would you ride anything else? And from there, that's all I ever had was gaited horses. And I don't remember, Drew is not a field trial dog, but I remember trying to compete. I bred her in 87, and it was to a show dog. So they were not field trial dogs. They were not bred to be field trial dogs. They were good hunting dogs. And I could see right away that if I wanted to compete with a Wirehair in field trials, that it needed to be, something that wasn't what I had. And I ended up, there was a trainer in Ohio, Jim Basham at the time, that was known to train. He had a lot of Gordons, Irish setters, and he had Wirehairs for a lot of people. But he was known to have a soft hand with those softer breeds. And so I talked to him, and he found me a dog. And that dog's name was Bounce. And oh my gosh, did we have fun with him. And I learned a lot from him, but he had hip dysplasia. And I should have kept him and just, gone on with him to learn. But he started fighting with one of my other adult male Wirehairs. And so I found him home, and I also felt bad about it that, it didn't work out for him, but I did, slowly got into better trial type dogs. And, then I met Greg, and we were both pretty hooked on this trialing, and we both had puppies the same year. They were born the same year. His dog's name was Archie, and I had Indy, and from totally different bloodlines, but we were constantly, not neck and neck, but we were always, competing against each other. And my dog's better than your dog. And this is before we were like dating or anything, was that we had a definite competition going. But what we didn't realize is that by puppy and derbying these dogs to death, neither one of them were ever broke. Indy actually was broke, but he never got retrieving points, and so he never finished. I think he ended up having about 15 points total. But he was a path runner, which is highly undesirable. Mm-hmm. And we just called him Crunch and Go, because he would come across a bird. He would point. If you were there, you could get him to, stay. And he would crunch it, and then he would not bring it back. Where most Wirehairs, they would be so proud of, the bird, they'd have to bring it back. Well, then you're done. He would just, we find, dead birds littered across the course. We were like, yeah, Indy's been here. But we kind of started, Archie was kind of the foundation of like Greg's dogs. But then we, got together and we started line breeding. He got Zip. And Zip was actually like Archie's niece, I want to say. And that was really the beginning of it, because we bred them and that produced Mo. And Mo produced, boy, I'd have to count, but I think she produced like 5 duels. There was 2 national field champions in that litter. Maybe there were only 3 duels, but it was just one of those once in a lifetime litters. She had 10 puppies. I'd have to look back, but it was unbelievable. But we had bred her, and we think that the recipe was that so she was pretty tightly line bred. We bred her to a very tightly line bred from a totally different line. So it was 2 very closely line bred dogs as an outcross. Mm-hmm. And it was, it was like, lightning in a bottle. It was pretty unbelievable. I think out of that litter, there were 7 or 8 that were titled, but at the time for them to be like a record or merit brood bitch, they all had to have OFA'd. They had to have OFA hips. And there was one dog in there of the dogs that they never did OFA him. So I'm guessing that he couldn't OFA, but otherwise she would have been like I suppose a supreme record of merit brood bitch. And then we just kept kind of breeding that recipe and had multiple national field champions and duels, and it was a good run. And but I think that in what year was it? Marley won the national in 2002. And there were 52 entries in the national championship. And it's gone down every year since then. So that's 22 years. And it's just, and there are, kind of the fringe breeds, like the Gordon setters, the Irish setters. Vizslas are pretty popular. Of course, the short hairs, the Brittany's, those breeds have tons of dogs, but the dogs, that it's hard to compete in all point and breed trials with, the Wirehairs, a lot of them can't compete with those. A lot of Gordons can't, a lot of Irish can't. And so they don't really close the trials, but it becomes a breed that you're like, well, what's the point of even like running one if you can't be competitive, if you want to be competitive? So many people that we know that have had, different, actually Vizslas, a lot of people that have had Vizslas have gone to pointers, or Weims have gone to pointers, just because maybe they're easier. I don't know. But so as our clientele got smaller, Greg kind of branched out because he wanted to continue training. So we started taking in, over the years, we've had quite a few Vizslas, quite a few Gordons, quite a few Irish, and we got a really good group of Irish setter customers. And so that's kind of where it's ending up. And I think that'll be probably both retirement age and how much longer are we going to be able to do it? I don't know. But we're down to pretty much just Irish setters, and like we've got one wire here that we still field trial. But we've kind of switched gears on where our wire hair breeding is more to hunting dogs, because the field trial wire hairs aren't suitable for your average hunter, the ones that we had. And you just get tired of it, but just not working out with these dogs. And I had a lot of luck with a Danish breeding that I did in I got Tori in 1990, so in the 90s. Just super temperaments and just really nice dogs and great hunting dogs and really good looking, everything, all of the boxes that I like to check. So we went back to Denmark and got we just actually got an entire breeding from a dog in Denmark. Excuse me. And I think that worked out really well. But now most of our dogs are German, German imports. Or now they're Get. Two bitches, two sisters that came from Poland. They've been really nice dogs. Have produced really nice dogs. And then we bred them to Enno, our first German import male. And I want to say that I need to look at it, but I think he's eligible now for an award of merit. Probably not the supreme, but probably a superior award of merit. He doesn't have a VC, but he does have a number of utility puppies. But he's been the number one stud dog for the last 2 years in the Wirehaired Club.
Oh, wow.
Primarily through, I would say, NAVHDA. Not a lot of people show their dogs. I do. And then some of them, actually quite a few of them went to people that like to show in, AKC confirmation. But the bulk of the dogs now go to NAVHDA people and to hunters. And I think across the board, they've been pretty happy with the dogs. And if they're happy, I'm happy. So,
I'd like to rewind a little bit. And in the beginning, you kind of talked about starting out with Wirehairs in obedience and confirmation, and kind of confirmation really getting to be an important part of your life, and transition kind of into the field dogs. With the Wirehair specifically, what do you think is the biggest difference between the show dogs and the field dogs?
well, I think that it's unfortunate, and I know that there's people that will disagree, but I think that there's people that are primarily breeding for a show dog, one that's going to be competitive in the show ring, to the detriment of their hunting ability, maybe their trainability. I think definitely their bird drive, and I think that there are a lot of people that are more like us, that we want a good looking dog, but it's got to be a hunting dog, and they're going to go to families, and we don't insist that they show their dog and finish them, but a lot more people insist that they test at a minimum in natural ability. But I think that the big thing is that they are losing the drive, the bird hunting drive. We were talking about it this past weekend. I was at a dog show, and it's probably not printable, but basically, some of these dogs, they couldn't find a bird if it was on their nose, kind of a thing. But we don't hunt with them. And years ago, there was a really nice dog out that actually went back to Greg's dog, Archie, who was a grandson. And I said, "Oh, we should breed to that dog." And Greg goes, "Why would you want to take a step backwards?" At that time, it was more for field trial dogs. And he felt we'd be taking a step backwards because it was the whole damn side was show stuff. And he did not see the point in just getting a better shoulder, But there are people, like us, that do try to have a dog that can do everything. It's getting harder and harder, I think, to have one that's competitive in the show ring. Our dogs, I think, have great coats, great temperaments. They're nice movers. They lack front. And we saw it time and again at 5 shows over the past weekend that they just didn't do anything because they lacked front. They had everything else, but what do I know, I guess. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
No, it does. And I'm always excited to find somebody who dabbles in both on the show side and on the field side. And I don't do a lot of show stuff, but I do show all of my breeding stock or potential breeding stock in IABCA because of the feedback that you get from the judges. And it helps me, number one, make sure that I am putting out the best structured dog that I can find, I guess would be a good way to put it.
right.
and then also understanding my female's faults so that way I can look for a complementary stud. Yeah, like I said, every time I hear somebody who takes conformation seriously in their breeding program, I'm always excited to ask questions about that. And I'll also say, and people have heard me say this before, I think hunters or field only breeders are just as guilty of ruining breeds as the show ring folks are, because the show ring folks are going to breed only for phenotypical traits, right? And I'm all excited because I learned two new words last week, phenotype and genotype. So they're going to breed for how a dog looks, and we're talking the extreme show breeders, right? And then the extreme field breeders are going to only breed for aptitude and temperament, right? Um,
Right.
and the show people are going to overlook hunting aptitude. The extreme field breeders are going to overlook structure. And we've seen plenty of field bred dogs that lacked structure. They conformed poorly, and they weren't hunting strong or healthily at 9 or 10 years old because of it.
Right. Well, that first dog I was talking about, Indy, had just a terrible bite. I mean, it was so undershot. And we were at a trial, and it was after he had run, and there was a pointer guy that was there, and he goes, "Man, that's an incredible wire here. You should be breeding." And I said, "Well, he's got a bad bite." And he goes, "He can eat, can he?" And we still laugh. We still pull that out, because there are, to your point of, it's only about their ability and nothing else. Now, structurally, he was a nice dog. I mean, yeah, he could eat. He had a bad bite, but structurally, he was sound. Um, he never was bred, but he was a fun dog. I mean, and he was a great dog to learn from. But the thing is, there's probably equally nice dogs out there that don't have the bad bite or a bad coat or whatever.
Right.
You don't have to go down that road. And we did that also once. We had a bitch that she was a phenomenal bird dog. She was an unbelievable bird dog. She was also an unbelievable field trial dog. And we just thought that she had so much to offer that we were going to she had a terrible coat. She was so ugly. She was the ugliest dog ever. It gave, the dogs, the Wirehairs, that ugly dog. She was that dog. And we decided that we would breed her. We bred her to a really nicely coated dog who was actually a dual. And, you got the mixed group of coats in the litter, some good, some not. We ended up with, it was a customer dog, but they brought a puppy back for training, and she was better than her mother and just as ugly. And we're like, well, so we bred her, and it just kept happening generation after generation. You would get those terrible coats. And it got to the point where, I just can't do it anymore. I can't, the grooming, they're impossible to groom. When they have that bad of a coat, they are impossible to groom. And the only way to groom is to shave them. Well, that's not the point of the wire hair breed.
Right.
And if you read our standard, and we said it multiple times this past weekend, because there were some dogs in there that their coats were awful at the dog show. And it was like, to be of correct type, they have to have a correct coat. And that's where the standard starts. And we've been really, I think, a lot more conscious of that. And especially, part of it, the reason is because as I get older, I don't want to groom. And there was a handler once that, he'd handle the top show Wirehairs. He loved the coat. Well, because I can sculpt them. Well, your average Joe, what are they going to do with all that coat? And it's just, I don't, there's only so much that I can do, and we try to educate, as much as you can. But, I think that's why we went to the German dogs, because there's no sculpting of the coats. I mean, the second dog that we imported, his coat is phenomenal. And I think across the board, that's what we're seeing with him, is just phenomenal coats. I mean, he is throwing the nicest coated puppies that I think we've ever seen. And to me, that's a great starting place. I mean, they have, again, when I talk to people that they're thinking about a puppy or, um, I said, it's like, I want to check all of the boxes. I want them to be good looking. They have to have a good mind. They have to be bird dogs. I like a great pointing instinct, because we've had the dogs that don't want to point and that they are so hard to train. I mean, you can train them to point, but if they have the natural ability or the natural inclination to point, it makes life so much easier. I'm sure, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
a natural retrieve. I mean, some people even go so far as to say one that naturally backs. And it's like, well, that you can pretty easily teach. And you can force break them to retrieve too. But if it's already there, I mean, that sure is nice to have. And it's like, is there one thing that's more important than the other? It's that it's so hard to say, oh, definitely this, because it's all that package of, you want all of those things in every dog. Of course, you're not going to get it, but we try hard that, all of our dogs are health tested. They all have chip numbers. And, so we do everything that the Wirehair Club suggests to get the chip number. But they've all been hunted. They've all been tested. Our dogs, I try to finish them all in the show, just because I guess that's how I got my feet wet in the whole thing, is that, and I like it. Yeah, I enjoy doing it. So I think that's, why I still do it. I don't think my husband understands, but I don't understand a lot of things that he does either.
Well, the show ring is pretty boring until it turns into a dual champion dog. Then all of a sudden, that sounds pretty appealing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've done that. They've been field champions. We drag them around, try to get the duel. We did that once. We got both the majors on the dog. I remember, I'd have to look and see how many points he has. And then the owner was just not interested at all in him being a duel. And it was expensive, and he was not a show dog at all. I mean, the dog was fun, and he would do it, but I just couldn't see myself dragging him around and trying to get those last points. And so we're like, hey, if he doesn't care, I guess we don't. And maybe we should have cared. I mean, it was Marley's brother, Stoney. Maybe we should have, but how much money can you throw into it? It's not your dog, but
Yeah, and time, right? So you mentioned before sculpting the coat, and when you say that, I can only think of poodles and their funny haircuts that a lot of owners will put on a poodle, and I'm trying to imagine. I'm having a hard time not imagining, I guess, a wire hair that is sculpted and shaved to look like a poodle, and I don't really know
well,
if I ever want to see that.
they don't shave them, but so they can strip the body coat, but then they've got all of the leg coat and feathers, and then they've got all the chest hair, and like the coat under their body, like their chest, and they can make it longer and make it look like they've got a better chest, or more front, that kind of thing.
Oh,
So then they back brush. And one of the grand dames of short hairs and wired hairs, Helen Shelley, she would just go wild. And it's like, you need somebody like that to try to rein these people in, but they don't listen anyway, because the judges are putting up the dogs that they're doing this with. But they would back comb the hair on their legs, and then they spray it. You cholesterol, and then chalk, and then hairspray, and you back brush it all up, so this is big brush, and then they go into the ring that way. And she's like, why are they making them look like terriers? And I'm like, because the judges are putting it up. But what it's doing is making them look like they have more bone. And
yeah.
our dogs, we have to, brush all the leg hair down, because they already have so much bone that you don't want them to look like they have more bone. So, but again, it's just one of those things that they do.
Yeah, that gamesmanship. I think that's what ruins the confirmation ring for a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of the breeds, it's you go right down the line of the dogs from the 50s and 60s that were cockers, Irish setter, Gordon setters, English setters, go right on down the list, and there's a split.
Yeah, sure thing. So now making the transition from field trial dogs and I assume we're talking mostly horseback trial dogs into kind of more focusing on hunting dogs and hunting companion dogs. How did you do that with your line, or did you just kind of start over?
We did. We basically um we had a dog from that Danish breeding that we really didn't have any bitches to go to. Everything was too closely related to him. And I'd been kind of asking different people if they had anything coming up that we could get a bitch from, that we could use to him down the road. But, more, not so much field trial bred, but just field bred. And of course, again, I wanted a good looking dog, good temperament, good coat. And one of the ladies that I talked to told me about this litter in Poland that, for whatever reason, it was a German stud dog and then a Polish bitch, and very nicely bred. And I guess there was, how with social media there was some hype about it. There was something wrong, and she said it was just, all rumor. And they wanted to get a puppy, and I said, well, we should both get a puppy. And so she did the legwork on it, and I think they had, boy, I don't remember now. I'd have to look. I think there were like 5 or 6 bitches for us to choose from. And so they sent over pictures, and we, mulled over and tried to figure it out. And um, she picked one and I picked one. And then the puppies were shipped to Chicago, and they were just north of Chicago. So they picked them up, and then I drove and got the puppy from them. And, I was used to these field trial puppies that, 3, 4 months old, I would lose control of them. I mean, they were so independent that I couldn't run them any longer. And so then they became, I'd raise them up to a certain point until they got out of control, and I'd start losing them on the farm. Then they became Greg's dogs. Well, this puppy, she got to be 4 months old and 5 months old. She always wanted to be with me. She always knew where I was. She hunted every bit as hard, and she is still, I mean, she's 7 now. She's a pretty big running dog, but I never lost her. Always knew where she was, and she always knew where I was. Super sweet, good looking. And we found out that there were still more puppies there. And a friend of mine and her dad said, we have to get one. So we brought in another one, and we co-owned that second one together. And she was actually probably the better put together bitch, had a better coat. But, through pictures and videos, you couldn't tell. But she turned out to be probably the better looking of the two that we had. Um, and then so Greg started helping us, getting them ready for natural ability. And he said, I don't know that we want to breed these two to the dog that I had, because he had, a little bit of that. He was still half field trial dog and half Danish dog, and he thought there was a little too much craziness there. And so that's when we started talking about bringing in a dog, and that's when we got Enno. So when those two girls got old enough, we had Enno, and we used him to those girls. And that's kind of how that all started with the European dogs. And I think with Aura and Nutty, those two would be the ones that probably put Enno on the map, because it was just really lucky. I think a lot of people were really interested in Enno. We used him quite a bit at stud, but a lot of people got Enno puppies from us, and then they tested him. And that's where like I said, he doesn't have a VC, but he's got quite a few, I think, utility prize ones where they could have. And I think that's kind of what put him on the map was, uh, getting into hands of people that wanted to themselves breed down the road. And, they looked at the pedigrees and they're like, man, where are you going to find that in the US? You're not. So he's been a really good, Emma's been a really good dog for us and the two bitches. And so now we've got, I think I have 4 Eno daughters that I've only bred. No, I take it back. I've got, I was going to say I only bred 1 so far, but we've got puppies right now. I've got a Eno daughter that we bred to Sam. And they're only 2 weeks old, so it's hard to tell. But the first Sam puppies are coming up on 2 years old, and they seem like they're going to be really nice dogs. So the natural ability puppy that I'm testing this weekend he's a Sam puppy. But what I like is that they have so much point. And again, it just makes life so much easier when they want to point. And a beautiful coat. So it's, grooming. It's that kind of coat that if you get into burrs, you see, we got into burrs, and the next time you see him, the burrs are gone. That's the ideal coat.
That's pretty nice. I don't have that luxury here with the poodle pointer and the Munsterlanders. Although I do think the Munsterlanders are a little bit easier than the poodle pointer. They get tied up in his beard, and they're not coming out, without a lot of work. And I refuse to cut his beard. I will not. I'll sit there and work on cockleburs for hours sometimes. But he starts out hunting season looking a little like me, and by the end of hunting season, not so much. He's pretty patchy. So it's just kind of what happens, I think, right?
That's just the way it is with those beards, but that's why they're there. That's why they've got the denser coat on the legs and on their chest, is that to protect them from the brush. Yeah. Not necessarily burrs, but that helps too.
And you grew up with Springers, so pretty soft coated dog, right?
Yep.
And then
but those are field Springers, the neighbor dog and our dog. And they don't look anything like the show Springers today. No. They had very little coat, but I do remember hunting with my dad, and we're at my uncle's, and I swear to God, they had a crop of burdock. It was a corn and then a row of burdock and then corn, and that poor dog couldn't walk. He had burrs stuck under his armpit. And back then, you didn't have a scissors or definitely didn't have a clipper. And my dad got his pocket knife out, and he just started hacking up the dog's leg, and it slipped, and he sliced his leg open. I'm just like, oh my God.
Oh no.
Poor dog. I mean, he laid him open. They had to take him to the vet. But it's like, well, that didn't work. Yeah. I was probably 12 years old. It's one of those things like you remember like it was yesterday.
And that's why you made the switch to Wirehairs right there.
Yeah, probably. Well, actually, what I had an Irish setter before I had the Wirehair. An Irish setter was my first dog, and then I got the Wirehair puppy, and so I rode. Boy, that was probably one of the summers that we actually rode. We had put shoes on our horses because we were riding so much, and we wore through the shoes. That's how much we rode, and the dogs would go with us. So I'd bring my Irish setter and I'd bring the Wirehair with. We rode everywhere. I mean, that was back when you probably couldn't. You didn't have to worry about getting run over, you or the dogs. Or if we went hunting, and if you hunted all day and you came back, and I would spend hours on the Irish setter trying to get him cleaned up, and he was another dog that I had that had hip dysplasia. And he'd get grumpy, and I'm like, hey, you can't keep all this crap in your coat. The Wirehair, I'd take a comb to him, and he's done in 5 minutes. And I always said that they both had really good temperaments, and they were both like just clowns, which they say, the Wirehairs really are clowns. But the Irish setter was like that too. And so I thought, apples to oranges, they were very similar dogs, and I loved them both. But when it came right down to it, the Wirehair was so much easier to take care of. And I said I would get another Wirehair before I got another Irish. And that's what I did then. As I got, then look at us now, how many Wirehairs later, but now we have Irish setter again too. So, but yeah, that was, for a lot of people, you don't really think about it. It's just, it's your breed. And so a little bit of grooming is not a big deal, but, for me, it was a game changer on the coat, going from the Irish setter to a Wirehair, just way less maintenance.
Well, and if you're going to have a bunch of dogs too, then less maintenance is always better.
Right. Definitely.
You know? So you've pretty much run the gambit then for temperamentally different dogs from the wire hairs, from the show ring, super cooperative to the opposite end of the spectrum to super independent, and then kind of settling somewhere in the middle with the hunting dogs. So when a potential puppy buyer comes up to you and asks you to stereotypically describe the temperament of a wire hair, what do you say?
Well, my best line is that they're a lot like a border collie. They need a job. And if you're not prepared to put the work into a dog, then the wire hair is not for you. And I spend probably more time trying to convince people that they don't want a wire hair. And some of them, it's interesting how some people look at it, that's, like the ugliest dog ever. Or like me, the first time I saw one, I just thought, I was like, oh my gosh, I just loved it. And, but some people are like that. They just love the look, or, they like the thought of a no maintenance or a low maintenance coat, but they're a high drive breed. And I think people don't understand that. I actually have a guy that was on my list to get a puppy. He's having some health issues. He's in his 70s. He's had 3 wire hairs. And, we're talking, and I said, I just don't think that you're in a position to have a wire hair puppy, especially one from these lines, because, they're very close to Germany. And I think that, in Germany, they're on top of these dogs from a very tender young age, and obedience is key. I'm sure that just from getting the 2 that we have, the 2 males, they were force broke at a young age, and they go through their testing, the testing regimen, and they're very strict, and they're on top of the dogs, and the dogs are made to toe the line. And I think that we see, from a training standpoint, and it's not just wire hairs, but a lot of people are observers. Isn't that cute what the dog is doing? Well, all of a sudden it's not cute when it becomes, like more, not so much a dangerous thing, but they just let the dogs do whatever they want. And then when it comes time to do some training, the dog's like, well, I've been doing whatever I want for the first, 12 months of my year of my life. Why would I want to listen to you now? Well, then they're in trouble. They're already behind the 8 ball. And, then we have to correct that. And then, we're the bad guys for making them listen. And so back to the question. Yeah, I would say that they're a lot like a border collie, that, the dogs need a job. And I said, if you don't have a job for them, or if you cannot interact with them and get them engaging with you, where they're the dog and you're the boss, then you're going to be in trouble with them. And, if you don't give them a job, they're going to find a job. And it could be digging or barking or chewing or all of the above. And a lot of times it is all of the above. And I talked to people, there was a lady now wasn't a Wirehair. This dog has like destroyed our house and it's chewed my shoes and it's done this and it's done that. And I go, what about a crate? Oh, that's just so mean. Oh, so the dog chewing through the electric cord or, eating a blanket, that's, and so you have to do exploratory surgery. That's kind. I mean, I don't know. I could go on and on about that, but,
And we don't think it's
we,
mean to put our kids in a playpen. Toddlers or babies go in a playpen, right? And we do that to keep them
right,
safe, right? So
exactly. It's
it's
for their
absolutely
own
not
good.
mean. All four of my dogs are in crates right here, right now, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't know it because they're trained to be in crates and
Yeah. Even
they're
this,
good with it.
I've got, what is she? She's an 8-week-old Irish setter now. Of course, she was a
Mhm.
singleton, so she's been alone a lot of her life. But when it's time to go in the crate, I just grab a puppy treat and she gallops into the crate.
Yep.
And now she may bark after I close the door, but not for very long. But,
No, not for long. And she's still a baby.
yeah, she's still a baby. But even these puppies, I'll start crate training them probably by 5 weeks old. Just put them in a crate for a little while together, have a cookie, have something to chew on, where it's not a big deal. At least get them started on their way. So when they go to their new homes, it's not a shock to the system. And if the new puppy buyers are asking for any words of wisdom, it's crate break your dog. And, during COVID, people were like, well, but I'm home all day. So crate your dog, because all you're doing is producing a dog that's then, have anxiety issues because they've always been loose. Always, we're home, crate them. I,
Yep.
we, I found a home for an older brood bitch, and the lady was having trouble with her. Now, this dog was 8 years old and leaving her loose while she was gone to work all day. And I said, she's never been loose. She's never had the opportunity at 8 years old, if I'm going to be gone for hours at a time, to be loose. So she started putting her in a crate. Well, guess what? There was no more problem. So it's like, even at that age, now at home, she's visiting here right now temporarily, and she's fine. I can have her loose now, but you know, if they're not used to it, well, we don't let them get used to it, basically.
Right. So besides big test weekend coming up with puppy and natural ability and the adult dog doing utility, you said they're doing them on the same day?
Well, I think that this is what they told me. It's been a really weird year. Um, and a lot of times they don't have enough. This is their third test this year. And they went from having a really long waiting list to actually not even hardly enough dogs. I think there's only five. I think there's only five natural ability dogs on Sunday, and then the dog I'm running in utility. And then on Saturday, they do not have a full test on Saturday either. And um, the test secretary was talking to him, and he said that he was talking to a lady that was trying to get into a test, and she was like 13th on the waiting list for not at their test, but a different test, and she got in. But I don't know what's going on, but there's just a lot of people they've just dropped out, and there were other utility dogs testing on Sunday, and they've all dropped out except for me. And I'm like, well, I should be dropped out too, because we're not ready at all. But I've never done it. And my husband just said, it'd be good for you just to go. You're going to be there anyway with the natural ability dog, and just do it. Get your feet wet and see what it's like. And because next year I do have a couple bitches that I'd really like to get, a utility title on them. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, you're going to
And
have your first test at some point, whether you do it this year or next year. So
right, right. Well, so we belong to Wisconsin River, and it's a great chapter. And the last couple of years, we've had to enter the dogs in February for their summer tests.
mhm.
And back then you're like, well, I'm going to have this dog ready. Well, life happens and I can't make any excuses, but I'm still not ready. But this year we wouldn't have had to do that. And I think what's going to happen is once I'm ready, then I'll try to find a test. And I don't know if it'll be the same thing next year or not, where last year it was so hard to get in any test and there were waiting lists for everything. And now this year you could get in just about anywhere, I think. So I would not have had to enter any dogs that long ago, but what are you going to do? But it's
Yeah,
kept me out, kept me training.
sure. Yep, keeps you with the dogs, and that's worthwhile right there, always. So I know our chapter is booked up for our test, but one of the other chapters in Indiana has been advertising that they've got tons of availability on one day for their test weekend as well. So yeah, I think what a lot of people do is they double or triple book their tests early on
Yeah,
in the year because everybody wants, they want that prize one, right? And
right,
if they get it early, then they cancel the other tests later on, and then the chapters have, seats to fill, right?
right.
So I can certainly understand doing that, but I also see kind of the fallout from it, you know.
And maybe that's what people did, and they just were like me, and they just realized that they're just not ready, just not ready at
Yeah,
all.
there's that too. What else are you guys working on your kennel this year besides this test weekend?
Well, Greg is he's gearing up to go to North Dakota with the field trial dogs. And then any of the hunting dogs, like the rest of the wire hairs, he'll take them along and start conditioning for hunting. And we've already got, pretty much our fall trial schedule set. And then he and his buddies already have their hunting dates set. So they're going to South Dakota and Montana. And, so they just basically have all of the dogs, just make sure that they're all, somewhat in shape, the hunting
Mhm.
dogs, but the trial dogs, I think our first trial is the second week of September. Um, this is a tough time of year to do much conditioning. So as soon as they start getting some cooling off, he'll really start pushing conditioning. But we don't have any young trial dogs where he's doing any breaking. We're mostly breaking the hunting dogs, or not so much breaking, but working on steadiness and obedience and things like that. But none of them are to the point where they need to be steady to wing and shot, which is what all of the trial dogs. But all of the trial dogs, I would say, are all pretty seasoned trial dogs, so they need brush ups on birds and honoring and things like that. And they're setters, so they don't have to retrieve. So it's not we have to do any retrieving work or anything like that. So yeah, just basically get ready for the trial season.
Right on. Now, you mentioned a lot of really standout dogs, and I always like to ask people about, dogs that they've owned or bred or handled that stood out to them. And to me, this has just got to be a really long list for you with, multiple dual champions and versatile champions and, national field champions and all this other stuff. But if you had to pick one or two dogs that you say, these are the best dogs that I owned or bred or handled for whatever reason, what would they be?
Oh, probably the best one was Marley. He was a dual champion, national field champion, backwoods Dershot Marley. And he was from that litter that we talked about where the two they were line bred dogs bred to each other. They weren't related. Um, and Wilson was his full brother, was also a national field champion, but we never tried to show him. So he was a field champion, national field champion. But Marley by far, because he was just one of those really cool dogs. I mean, he was just a cool dude. And but he was a dog that when you turned him loose, he gave you everything. And he was just so much fun to watch. And I probably spent more time scouting him because Greg was the handler. And sometimes I missed a performance because I was looking for him and he was, right where he was supposed to be up front. But he was just a phenomenal dog. And in the wire-haired world, there's not a lot of dogs that are at that same level as him. But Marie Laveau von Steuben was one. John Williams had a dog. I'm going to draw a blank. He'll hate me for it. Gosh, what was his name? But they all had like 100 field trial points, which is a lot if you think about it. Like some dogs, you can go on AKC or, there's different places you can find how many field trial points that they have. And a lot of dogs, they have 10 points and then you never see them again. But Marley was a dog that, time after time after time. And, he won the championship twice, but he also placed in it numerous times. Lewis was another dog, Backwoods long shot. He was another national field champion. But I would say the standout for me was Marley. And the other dog that I just love was this, is an Irish setter, and his name was Brophy's Butler Buckaroo, and his call name was Rhett. And he's the one that we just used frozen semen on him, and I've got a 8-week-old puppy racing around that hopefully she'll be the standard bearer for him. He was an unbelievable dog. And I don't know if it was, I think a lot of it was that he was just a phenomenal athlete, but we loved his owner too. And he was so much fun. And we've got so many stories about his owner, and his owner got cancer and like in 16, and it was dead by 2018. And it was just heartbreaking. And his family took the dog, but we had frozen semen on him, and the family got the bill, and they're like, well, what is this for? And they're like, well, let's just throw it out. And I went, oh, please God, no, don't throw it out.
No.
So I paid the storage on the semen until this year, and we were able to finally use it. And, thank the stars or, whoever you want to thank, but we did get a puppy out of it. So I'm pretty excited about that. But there's been so many, over the years, we've had just phenomenal dogs in all breeds. We've had the top two Gordons, Cobb and his son Colonel, were phenomenal Gordon setters. And we used to go to the Gordon Setter Nationals, and both of them were multiple national winning dogs in the Gordon Setter world. We've had multiple national field champions in the Irish Setter world. James is another one. James is an Irish Setter that just super fun dogs. And they literally, you have dogs over the years that you just don't know who's going to show up. If they're going to give you like a performance like they can, or they're just having a kind of a bad day. All of those dogs gave you everything every time down, and there's just you see enough of the dogs that run like that, or compete or perform like that, and when the job is getting done. Bella, we had a pointer that won the AKC Gun Dog Championship at the Ames Plantation. Beat the most, how did that go? She beat like the most field champions ever assembled in AKC and at the Ames Plantation. She was another one that was a pretty phenomenal dog that primarily Greg, he did not start Rhett, but he got Rhett in to train and, put the polish on him. But all the other ones, I think that he started them and finished them and handled them. I think Cobb and Colonel both were national amateur field championships, which, obviously Greg couldn't handle them, for that. But yeah, there's a lot of them. But I would say at the top still is Marley. He was just a very neat dog. And when he retired to the house, he was just this great house dog. And he was a dog that could be a babysitter. It didn't matter if they were chewing on his private parts. And you'd look at him like, what are you doing? He's just didn't have a mean bone in his body. And just, which is always fun when you've got a dog that's a field trial, competitive field trial dog, and they retire and they're like, they live in the house and they're like, man, this is sweet, and they're just great dogs. And he was a good dog. He has hardly been bred. We've got frozen semen on him, and he's hardly been used. We talk about it every now and then, but we're like, who would we breed him to? We don't have any really trial bitches, and
Somebody does,
yeah,
right?
someday somebody will use it.
Yep, he's the right stud for somebody. So before we wrap up, I do want to talk to you about the breed club a little bit. And we didn't mention that you are the president of your breed club. So can you tell us kind of what's going on, what you guys have in store for the rest of the year?
Well, our big push right now is we're getting ready for our national specialty, and it's in Michigan this year. Just finishing up the judges panel. I think all of the show judges are in place. We're at a county fairground for the show, and then we're at Ionia, the Ionia recreational area. They've got a great field trial grounds there that a lot of people use. Really, that's our big event. The national club, the big event is their national in the fall. A lot of the local clubs have their specialties in the summer. We just had the Wisconsin specialty just this past weekend, and that was a big success. I want to say that we had 24 or 25 dogs entered, and that's almost a third of what the national entry will be. So it was a big deal. And
That's great.
there was, I don't think there were really any absences either. So I believe that there were, easily in the 20s of Wirehairs, and people came from Michigan and Indiana and Iowa, Illinois, kind of all over, kind of the Midwest area, Wisconsin. Are there any Minnesota? Don't remember. I've already forgotten. Unfortunately, I'm not a great details person, but
The president doesn't have to be, right? You just orchestrate, and you've got the detailed people to do detailed things, right?
yeah,
Liz, I want to really thank you for being on the show. Thanks for coming on and representing your breed and, telling us all about your journey from springers all the way through the race car wire hairs and then back into
yeah.
the more companion hunting wire hairs. I'd like to give you a chance to kind of close it out if you have any kind of closing thoughts that you'd like to tell everyone.
I think that overall, the wire hair is a great breed. A lot of people call them a Jeep. They're the kind of the Jeep all-terrain vehicle of your sporting dogs. Not all of them. There are some that are more of a Ferrari, that they are still trial dogs, and boy, they're fun. But I just think that the best homes for the wire hairs are the single family homes. People that want to do NAVHDA, people that hunt, they want to put the time into them and make them the best dogs that they can be, because there's so much untapped potential on so many dogs. And I'm guessing you could say that about just about any breed. But the wire hairs definitely, if you're thinking that a wire hair, you like the looks of them, they are great dogs, but you have to put the time in. They're not going to be a dog for a couple of years that's going to want to sit on the couch with you. They're super cute puppies, and then all of a sudden they're 4 or 5 months old, and you need to start putting the time in and start getting them ready to hunt. Whatever it takes, tons of obedience. If you're looking for a dog that wants to hunt with you and for you, um, obedience, 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 and get them out as much as you can. We're so lucky because we have 200 acres here, and as soon as they're big enough, we're out the back door, and I just start walking the puppies. And that's, I think, part of the reason that we had good success with the trial dogs, is that they had the opportunity to be independent dogs. But even these guys, we've got back to I can hear quail. They're going through the backyard right now. Quail, they don't want to go back to the quail pen. Greg runs a great Johnny house, and they're like wild birds. And day after day, people don't believe me. I've got a 2-year-old dog that last year, as a 1-year-old dog, he probably had seen 500 quail. But from a puppy on, if we went out to the quail pen every day and I let 30 birds out and he hunted 30 birds, I mean, you can get up into that 500 quail mark in a big hurry. And he stands and he watches. We pheasant hunted him last fall and he watched the pheasants fly away. Yeah, he was the one bird. I've got a picture of him. You can just see his head. He's a dot on the horizon, and then the wings of the pheasant going over the horizon. And he's just standing there watching it fly away. But he likes to point, and he's had a ton of quail, a ton of birds that just get up and fly away if he gets too amped up or he wants to, come in too close on them. They teach him to back off and to point, but he likes to point. And again, now I've digressed again, but back to the Wirehairs in general. It's a breed that you want to do something with them. And again, if you are looking for a fat man's hunting dog, that doesn't have a lot of motivation, it's not going to be a Wirehair. They want to get out and do stuff, and they want to do it with you. And they're going to be a better dog for that, for, you putting the time in and living with them. And doesn't mean you have to spoil them and baby them, and they're not your, they're not your fur baby. They're still a dog, and they do need rules, and they're going to be better with you being the dominant person, because they are good Germans and they're going to want to dominate everything, and they'll dominate everybody in the family. And I mean, we hear about it. We don't see it here because there's not a family to dominate, but we're both the alphas in their lives, and there's no chance for them to try to do that. But that's not even in a nutshell, but that would be what I would have to say about a Wirehair.
Well, I appreciate that. And if people want to contact you somehow, what's the best way for them to reach out?
They could go to the GWPCA website, and all of my information is on there. But we've got a website, backwoodsbirddogs.com, and I try to keep that fairly up to date. But it's got contact information. I'm a member of both the Twin Cities Wirehair Club and the Wisconsin. And Twin Cities, that website is tcgwpc.org. And there's some good articles on that, informational things about the Wirehair and the Wirehair breed. Brene Braun, who's a longtime member of the club, and she's got a really good article that we've got permission to post on our website. I think it's called, why do I want a Wirehair, or do I want a Wirehair? And it's a really good, informative article about, people just thinking about maybe getting into that breed. So.
All right, Liz. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. It was great talking to you and great hearing all your stories.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and hopefully we can do some education for people.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 28 of the Wool Post podcast. If you did, leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. That actually helps us a lot in getting us higher up in the list so other people can recognize and give us a listen. Remember to follow the show on Facebook or Instagram. And if you have any comments, or if you own a bird dog related business and you'd like to advertise on the Wool Post, you can always email me at bill@thewoolpost.com. Stay steady and God bless.